went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak, and he taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you."
Friday before last, I had lunch with one of my UCC minister colleagues. She's fairly new to the area, came about a year ago to serve the UCC church in Renton. And we talked about all kinds of things, as clergy do. One of them was preaching, always a helpful thing, kind of sharing tips and ideas and such. She said that during February, when the prescribed readings turned to the Sermon on the Mount, that she was going to preach about Mr. Rogers. And I immediately thought, that's a fantastic idea. Just one of those instinctive kind of things. That's a really good idea. I wasn't sure what I would say because I didn't really know that much about him, but it sounded like both a good, juicy challenge, but also maybe something that could be a bit whimsical, which is my favorite kind of preaching to do. But now that the time is actually here, it feels prophetic to me. It's great to see the sun today because what a grim week we've had. Those impeachment hearings have been appalling. I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum. If you've turned it on the car radio when you've been driving from here to there or had it on the TV, you will have been appalled. On Friday, that vote in the Senate about whether or not to call witnesses, my mom had just come home from her convalescence center, and we were there with the television on. And for a moment, it looked like the vote was going to be tied, but then, as you know, it settled 51-49. And you couldn't help but note to yourself, there's our country, split just absolutely down the middle, disgust between one side and the other at an all-time high. And then, literally, we just changed the channel. That's not how you do it anymore. We changed the channel from that Senate vote, and there was Brexit. They were hauling down the European flag from Parliament Square. There were mourners gathered with candles in front of the EU offices in London, while just a couple of blocks away, revelers wrapped in Union Jack flags were dancing in the streets. Again, a society just utterly divided. Blessed are the pure in heart, the meek, the peacemakers, those who hunger and thirst for what is right. It's almost like those words come from some parallel reality as we watch liars and blusterers having their field day, as we watch journalists whipping up controversy, as the leaders we put our faith in hunger and thirst for power or revenge or just victory. Never mind what you have to do for it. The contrast has felt so stark, it's hard to know what to do with it. Was Jesus deluded? Or was he calling us to something so difficult that human beings can't obtain it? Or holding us to an innocence that can't survive the pressures of adult life? Then I remember Jesus lived in difficult times too. This is nothing new. How is it that he blesses the kind of people who come up losers over and over again in the dog-eat-dog world that we know? What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. Fred Rogers, for anybody who doesn't know, was the creator of a children's television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It aired for over 900 episodes over 30 years and more, through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Few of us here are young enough to have watched it as children, but others of us would have been aware of it from the sidelines. We all knew the show. It featured a host of friendly characters in this little close-knit community that he built. The characters included quite a lot of puppets. But the power of it was Mr. Rogers himself. He would look into the camera. It was like he was looking through and straight into the eyes of the child who was watching on television. He spoke directly to those children, sounding a lot like Jesus. I like you, just the way you are. I've always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. Doesn't it feel good when you help somebody? That's like such a good feeling. You are special. Jesus said, blessed, but it sounds a lot like the same thing. Now, in one sense, Mr. Rogers was naive. Certainly, people have had no trouble mocking him. But there was something so authentic about him, so unapologetically and unwaveringly constant, that he made goodness credible. He would tell you that he was far from pure in heart, but you'd have a hard job finding anybody closer. These days, his friends say, thank goodness Fred didn't live to see that, how things are today, school shootings and all the viciousness in social media. What would Fred have said to all this? But that implies that he was out of touch in the time that he did live, and he was not. He was born in 1928 on the brink of the Great Depression. His parents were from the two leading families in the town, just outside of Pittsburgh, so the financial crash didn't touch him personally. But practically every day, his mother would come home with a story. She reached into the family pockets, this was every day, in order to help people in all different kinds of need. She paid debts, she bought groceries, she took children to the shoe store and parents to the doctor. She saw to it that the schools had the supplies and equipment that they needed. Generally, she met any need anybody brought to her attention. These are our neighbors, she would say. The best thing you can ever do is help somebody. And Fred Rogers was 11 years old enough to know what was going on when war broke out in Europe. All his life, he remembered evenings with his parents huddled around the radio to hear news of the fighting. In other words, he lived with eyes open experience of how cruel human experience can be, how appallingly we can treat each other, how greedy we can be. But he saw something else too. He saw the children we all were once, and the possibility for redemption if we could reconnect with the openness and need and vulnerability we felt as children, if we could get past all the barriers and defenses, all the armor we created to protect ourselves. In 1998, he wrote to a friend, at the heart of the original creation is that word, call it love, call it grace, call it peace, that essence which is lodged somewhere within each of us that longs for ultimate expression. If we choose to allow it to grow, we will be given help. If we choose otherwise, we won't be forced. So in one sense, it's as clear as a message can be. Go ahead, watch the TV news, be appalled, but know that there's an alternative. Blessing flows into the world through people brave enough to be pure in heart, reckless enough to be meek, determined enough to be peacemakers, resilient enough to stand firm when they're reviled and persecuted. Let the world call it naive. That's just one form maybe of being reviled. They are wrong. It is older and wiser and deeper than that, and ultimately stronger too. Ultimately indestructible, even while it stands utterly vulnerable against the bullies it challenges. A bit like the cross. See the alternative, see the cost of it, but see the power of it too, and choose it. Over these next few Sundays, I want to draw from stories of someone who chose it. It was a choice. One of the stories they tell about Fred Rogers was about a day in elementary school when, for some reason, school got out early. So the family chauffeur, who always showed up in it was a convertible Pontiac, front gate of the school to pick him up, wasn't there. And young Fred started trotting off towards home. A few blocks along, he got the sense that somebody was following him. And looking over his shoulder, he saw a group of boys from the school. At which point they started to chase him. "Hey, fat Freddy, you better run, we're going to get you." So he ran, without much hope of being able to outrun them. Terrified, he was really relieved to recognize the house of some people who were friends of his family. He ran up to their front door and pounded on it, and fortunately they were home. They opened it up and let him in. And along with other adults in his life, they told him, the thing to do is not let them know that you care. Just ignore what they say, and then they'll leave you alone. But he did care. More than anything in the world, Fred Rogers cared. It was caring that defined the character of his mother, and it was caring that increasingly influenced the character of him, that very shy but increasingly resolute boy. Fred never accepted the advice that pretending not to care would alleviate loneliness or pain in his life. As he grew older, he struggled to work out a set of responses to the challenges of life that could turn his caring and his belief in love and his great sensitivity into a life course based not on fragility, not on this could go wrong any moment, but on a quiet strength that he could then offer to other people. In weeks like this one, when that kind of strength in its beauty and promise seems a million miles away from what we've become as a people, we need to choose again. I don't see any of us here becoming bullies, but we can get cynical. Don't. As you come to communion this morning, let it be with the promise that you will keep reaching for that purity of heart, that kindness, that humble walking with the God of love, through which even now, if Jesus is right, God can save the world. Amen. We offer our money as we offer our lives to the service of the God of love. Our gifts will be received